Heads up, XRP might be about to pull the single biggest you snooze, you lose move in crypto history. Blink, and you could miss the breakout that we've been waiting 3 long years to see. Okay, so let me set the scene, right? It's just past 1 AM here in Dubai. The aircon in my apartment is fighting a losing battle with the desert heat, and the only thing louder than the buzzing city outside is the buzz in my head after scrolling through the day's market data. I'm staring at a fresh espresso that's going lukewarm because I can't look away from the screen. CME's brand new XRP futures contract just posted another burst of volume, and it feels like the starting pistol of something way bigger. Now remember how Bitcoin and Ethereum futures quietly opened the door for their spot ETFs. Deja vu is knocking, and its name is XRP. Now, if you followed this channel for longer than a couple of double espressos, you know that I've never really been one to shy about calling XRP's drama. For years, it's been the soap opera token, lawsuits here, Twitter fights there, and every grandpa at Thanksgiving is asking, didn't the SEC kill that one already? So picture me refreshing the CME dashboard and watching those first few trades settle. That's 50,000 XRP blocks clearing like someone just discovered the institutional investor only cheat code. Now day one kind of told roughly $19 million in notional volume. Day two, 10 million more. Now critics grumble it should be higher. Only, 1,380 contracts in a week, one totaling 35 million. Yeah, sure, if you compare it to Bitcoin's market cap. But zoom out and realize this never existed before Monday. Institutions don't speed date, they call, they vibe, they sign prenups. And right now, XRP's lighting scented candles on Wall Street's dinner table. Now, here is the part that made me literally shout, "No way," at my monitor. Right? CME didn't roll out just one contract. They launched two sizes, a micro 2,500 XRP and a big boy 50,000. Now that's Wall Street's kind of saying, come on in, hedge funds, interns, and pension fund giants alike. We've got stakes in all sizes, right? Cash settled, backed by a daily reference rate, and importantly, regulated. Now, regulators sign off, banks relax, liquidity pulls up, and suddenly that old XRP is too risky excuse looks like last season's fashion. And speaking of regulators, let's talk about the wild card in Washington, right? Imagine swapping the SEC's chair mid-game, the way that you swap out a top laner in League of Legends, right? Enter Paul Atkins, confirmed last month after President Trump, he's back, tapped him faster than I tap the skip ad button on YouTube. Now, Atkins isn't exactly the crypto bro pouring shots at the after party, but compared to Gary Gensler, he's practically DJing in a laser suit. So the first week on the job, and he's already hosting a roundtable with industry leaders. 70 plus crypto ETF applications are piled on his desk right now, including multiple bids for an XRP spot fund. Word from inside the kind of beltway, decisions were punted to June, but the vibe shifted overnight from maybe next decade to could be in the next quarter. Now, I hear someone in the back yelling, ETF hype means nothing until Ripple lawsuit is finally in the rearview mirror. Trust me, right? I've screamed that into the void for 15 months straight, but here's the twist. We're finally at that kind of bargaining kind of table endgame, right? Ripple and the SEC are hashing out revised settlement terms so Judge Torres can rubber stamp them and go binge watch Bridgerton in peace. And if that gavel drops in Ripple's favor, the compliance desk, at a dozen different asset managers are going to slam the file new ETF button so hard that they'll need an ergonomic keyboard. So picture BlackRock, Fidelity, WisdomTree lining up like it's the latest kind of iPhone release. Zoom out again, and the US is playing a regulatory catch-up. But Brazil just lapped the field, right? Hashtag launched XRP-H11, the world's first spot XRP ETF. Now, this is on the B3 exchange last month. Now, the thing went live and started vacuuming up institutional orders like a kind of Roomba on Thanksgiving crumbs. Now, when another country kind of builds an XRP on-ramp for pension funds before the SEC even finishes its morning coffee, you believe that or at least you better believe the American suits, they start sweating. And then there's the Oval Office curveball. Now, Trump signed an executive order in March to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve and a broader US digital assets stockpile. Now, buried in the press release, like kind of sprinkles under a mountain of ice cream, was the explicit nod to exploring other high-velocity settlement assets. Translation, XRP sits right there on the short list. So think of it as a crypto kind of version of the strategic kind of petroleum reserve. If the US starts stacking digital barrels of XRP, that's not just bullish. That's a global liquidity overhaul with Uncle Sam's stamp on it. Okay, so here's a quick pit stop for all of the skeptics. But Nick, geopolitics is a dumpster fire. Wars, sanctions, market fears. And it's true. But even that's kind of nudging in XRP's favor right now. Ceasefire talks between Russia and Ukraine are itching from never gonna happen to okay, maybe. And we might just see the biggest kind of prisoner swap since the invasion even started. And Reuters, says a draft peace document is actually on the table. If macro risk does indeed calm down, money floods back into risk assets, and guess which digital bridge asset is perfectly positioned to shuffle capital across borders at light speed? That's exactly right. Okay, so let's make it super relatable. Right? Remember that friend who bought Apple stock after the first iPod announcement, then forgot about it and now casually vacations at the Maldives twice a year. Now, XRP futures, it feels like that iPod moment, right? The hardware, that's Ripple Net Payment Rails, has been there, right? But the CME listings in the kind of glossy keynotes that kind of finally grabs Wall Street's attention. Futures begets liquidity, liquidity begets and supports ETFs, and ETFs invite retirement funds, and retirement funds brings the new kind of slow, steady demand that shrugs at day trader volatility. Oh, and before I forget, if you're trying to keep your finger on the pulse without kind of melting your brain alone at the 2 in the morning, pop into our free crypto Discord server. There's a link chilling in the description down below, right? We dissect charts, share memes, and yes, celebrate every little regulatory headline with the same energy as the UEFA fans reserve for last-minute goals. So where does Blowfin fit in? And I'm glad you asked, right? Blowfin is the up-and-coming crypto exchange that's been out-innovating platforms twice its size. Their interface is slick, fees are honest, and the order books are deeper than my late-night, existential kind of thoughts about Bitcoin dominance. Now, if you want to actually trade the moves that we're, dissecting here, rather than just screaming at CNBC, hit that link that's in the description down below, open a Blowfin account, and start working those limit orders like a pro. All right, so let's get back to the juicy part then, right? Remember 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗏1, the analyst whose threads kind of sparked half this video. Now, he laid out what he calls the XRP domino effect, right? futures listings, spot ETF approvals, institutional adoption, price discovery on a scale that retail has, well, never seen. And he might be onto something, because that's exactly kind of the sequence that played out for Bitcoin and Ethereum. So think of institutional money as the kind of giant kind of tanker ship, right? It takes forever to turn, but when it finally changes course, it reshapes the tides for every single sailboat in its wake. But let's not kid ourselves. Every kind of rose has thorns. Volume could stall, regulators could change their minds, and Ripple could fumble the settlement ball at the 1 yard line, right? So remember, 1,380 contracts. It isn't exactly earth-shattering. It's the equivalent of a kind of coffee tester sip compared to the double shot espresso chug. Now, we're ultimately, or at least what we ultimately want here, is the chug. So if institutions don't scale up their positions, the entire narrative kind of fizzles like flat soda. Yet, look at the micro contracts. They exist precisely to let cautious players nibble before festering. Now, you don't fill your plate with chili until you've tested the spice level, right? And while we're spice testing, consider this. CME's reference, rate takes the average XRP price across multiple exchanges at 1,500 hours UTC daily. That standardization means no more Wild West indexing. Fund managers finally have a metric that passes compliance sniff tests, combined with Ripple's near zero settlement times, and we're talking financial plumbing robust enough for central banks, not just weekend degens. And Atkins, for his part, he hasn't shied away from the bold rhetoric, right? In his first SEC kind of speaks, address he kind of actually literally said, and I quote, "Regulation should foster innovation, not frighten it into offshore exile." So guys, that's the, legislative equivalent of shouting shots fired at Gensler's entire legacy, right? You can practically hear the corporate lawyers rewriting internal memos from avoid XRP to conduct preliminary risk assessment, ASAP. And meanwhile, of course, globe-trotting XRP is securing passports left and right. Latin America's payment giants are tinkering with on-demand liquidity pilots. European banks are quietly building ISO 20022 bridges that drop XRP straight into their messaging stack. Even in Asia, where every other day another stablecoin pilot hits the headlines, banks are asking whether XRP's liquidity hubs can kind of outmaneuver Swift's tired, decades-old corridors. And so, let's connect all these dots. Futures volumes climb. SEC under pro-crypto leadership. Lawsuit settlement nearing. Brazil's ETF proves demand. Peace talks for, optimism kind of at least reduces macro fears. You've got Trump's digital reserves and legitimacy, right? That's 6 dominoes in a kind of perfectly straight line. Knock the first one gently and you'll set off a chain reaction that could propel XRP from fringe settlement token to must-hold portfolio hedge in maybe months, not years. And yes, I can hear the old jokes, but Nick, XRP Army has been promising moon landings since 2018. And it's fair, right? They really have. But every meme has its moments where the joke turns into reality. Remember Dogecoin's kind of trip past 50 cents or GameStop's shock and awe short squeeze, right? If you treat probabilities like football scores, XRP just added a star striker, a new coach, and home field advantage, all in one transfer window. And I am not saying to mortgage your camel and go all in. I'm just saying widen your lens. Crypto has matured beyond single-digit Satoshi dreams. Today's game is all about liquidity rails, ESG compliance, and global regulatory harmonization. Right? XRP's recent milestones, they target exactly those grown-up metrics. So let me bring it down to earth. So suppose, let's say institutions allocate just 0.25% of their combined $2 trillion alternative assets into XRP once ETFs go live. That's $5 billion of fresh demand. At current supply, simple math pushes price far beyond today's $2 neighborhood. Add cross-border settlement demand, central banks parking strategic reserves, remittance corridors ditching nostro accounts, and suddenly price models start looking like my 3 a.m. caffeine levels. Way too high to be healthy. Okay, so one last personal admission before we wrap up this video. Earlier tonight, I scrolled back through some of the old tweets and some of the old live streams that I had put out on YouTube, where I said that XRP is most likely going to end in a settlement. It's going to be kind of a boring chart until the lawsuit comes to an end. And I totally do own that take. But clarity is kind of peeking over the horizon, like sunrise over 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗔𝗥𝗡 Road, right? And I'm not about to kind of miss the golden hour simply because my ego wants to stick to an old opinion. Now, markets, they do evolve. Narratives, they do indeed pivot. And as traders, our job is to ride the wave, not stand on the beach yelling how things should be. And so here's my challenge to you. Don't let old headlines write your future trades. Do the homework, watch the order books, and keep an eye on those CME volumes. And if you want company, the Discord door, well, it's wide open.